Hi, my name is Poulomi, and you are listening to Artcast with Poulomi, a podcast about a whole lot of really interesting things about the world of art, movies, and visual culture. We are available on Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube, so you can listen to us anywhere. And also check out our Instagram, where we post stuff about our art and workshops and everything we do basically. Today, we are going to talk about something that has always been so fascinating to me. Something that's a part of all our lives, but at the same time haunts everyone's imagination. Can you guess what it is? It's the sinister, seductive, and scary world of mirrors and reflections. I think my fascination with mirrors started at a very, very young age. I don't even remember when this was, but I remember when I was probably 4 or 5 years of age, I watched this very creepy show called Ahat. It was one of those shows where you can't really look away, but you are so scared of what's happening on the screen at the same time. And I don't know why, as human beings, we are always, like so intrigued and attracted towards things that frighten us. It's been one of the spaces that psychoanalysts have had a field day to work on. I remember watching this show through that one tiny slip in the door because I was not allowed to watch horror films, horror series when I was a kid. Of course, no kids are. But I was hooked onto this one show and all the stories that it had to tell. One of the episodes that I watched, I remember, was this episode in which this woman buys a cursed mirror from an old shop and then she brings it home. And then she really, really starts admiring the way her reflections look in that mirror because there was something very sexy about her reflection in these mirrors, which she didn't feel about herself before she had gotten the mirror. And slowly, slowly, we started realizing as the audience, because the woman would move away from the mirror, but then as the audience, you get to see that the mirror is still reflecting her, and then the reflection starts becoming sentient. So we see that the reflection slowly, is coming out of the mirror and taking on ornaments, taking on things that the woman is not wearing that day. So I remember very distinctly there was this one episode in which she was wearing a pink sari and she dresses in front of the mirror and then she looks at her reflection and she says that, oh, I'm looking beautiful today. And then she goes to office and then the reflection out of the mirror puts its hand out and takes up the pearl necklace and wears it. Later that day, this reflection steps out of the mirror, assumes the identity of this woman, and goes to her office and, goes to meet her lover. And it was a whole thing. And the difference between these two were how could you tell which one is the reflection and which one is the actual woman? The woman was wearing a sari, and the palla of the sari was on the other side when the reflection would come out. I remember that one of the things that kept happening in the episode was everybody was constantly surprised by how free the reflection was and how she was so much more fun than the actual woman, that she was making dangerous choices, that she was doing things that the woman would not do. So I remember this entire interlude with the lover where the lover is like, oh, today you are very romantic, but otherwise you are not this romantic. For even to my child brain, this entire thought that somebody who looks like you, acts like you, somebody who is literally a reflection of you in a mirror could have a personality that could be so distinctly different, that could be making choices that you don't make, that could be living a life that you don't live, was so interesting and uncanny at the same time. I think that was the beginning of my association with this fascinating idea of what reflections mean and how mirrors interact with you and what they actually stand for. As a child, of course, those were not the things that I was thinking. As a child, I was petrified of any mirror after watching this, and I just remember like running really fast away from all the mirrors in the house. I was very, very scared of anything that reflects. There were times that I remember I would stand in front of those mirrors and like smile eerily to myself to see if the smile kind of gets extended in the reflection. Yeah, I think somebody observing me would have had a field day.
So that's actually a really interesting thing that you said, because I also used to do this as a kid, where I would look at my reflection and I would try to see if like my reflection is moving at the same time, or if it's, like moving just slightly a little later than I am. Where do you think this comes from, like this entire concept of our reflections not really being just a reflection but like a different entity altogether?
I think as kids, the first sense that all of us make of who we are is through the mirror. And that's why, in a lot of cultures, I think it's also forbidden to show a kid the mirror before a certain age, because
Right.
it's supposed to be this portal to the other world where, like all kinds of demons and evil
Yeah,
spirits
yeah,
can
yeah.
kind of take over the kid's life. There are so many stories, so many folk tales, so many myths around the mirror as a demonic device, that it just makes me feel extremely interested to understand how could this lore actually begin. Starting from ancient Greek history, the mirror has always been the space where the underworld kind of crosses over, or it's a space which becomes toxic and can kind of really take over your thoughts and make you pine for different realities. This is also something that we see explored so many times in different film, TV, etc., which I do want to talk about it at some point, but I think the first thing that I think of when I think of like the obsession and the seduction of mirror would be the tale of Narcissus. And how, now, of course, in
Right.
our popular culture, the idea of narcissism and narcissistic disorder and all of those have become like such easy words and terminologies to talk about. Psychology has really, really focused on this trait of extreme form of self obsession and self love. If we go into Greek mythology, the tale of Narcissus is one of the first tales that I think I had read or had gotten to know about somebody's obsession with their reflection. Narcissus was kept away from everybody by his mother because there was apparently a prophecy around him that he would be the prey of a very, very deep, very anguishing love story. And hence his mother was very scared of letting him even talk to people. So, he was very beautiful, and everybody kept pining for him because he was so beautiful, but he was not allowed to talk to anyone. However, at one point of time, he saw his own reflection in a pool of water. And it is said that he fell so deeply in love with himself that he couldn't move away from that pool of water, and he literally dies there. He couldn't even drink out of that pool of water because it'll deflect his reflection and it'll ruin it. That's also, I think, where Rowling got the idea of calling Draco Malfoy's mother Narcissa, because she was like this very self absorbed lady. But this is just one of the myths that talk about the idea of the mirror as something which could be destructive. I think in this particular story, we talk about vanity and how that is something that can totally consume your being and make you into somebody who just can't look away from your own beauty. They have, I feel, always been a very, very powerful motive in art, culture, and literature due to their ability to reflect what you can't see. And it is from there because you experience your existence in one way, but mirrors kind of show you the visuality of, they literally translate you visually into what you experience your existence as. And I think at a fundamental level, there is a distrust and a break between that idea. It's something that we also see a lot in how we are able to create all of these different personas for ourselves on different social medias. Like your Facebook persona is so different from your Instagram persona, and your Snapchat persona, and your LinkedIn persona. I think this is just, like the same phenomena at play. When you see yourself represented in a way that is tangible, it can be scary because you experience your existence in so many ways that to see that being limited to just this one very contained, very small visual representation can be extremely scarring, I would feel. When you look at all of these ancient tales that kind of create a telltale sign of mirrors being scary, a lot of them also focus on how mirrors are able to reflect your sins, or mirrors are able to reflect your wrongdoings, or mirrors are able to reflect the things that no one knows about you but you. So in Chinese afterlife myths, there is the story that the souls that could make through the gates of demons were bought before the Yam King, and he would look through their good and bad deeds through the mirror of the wicked, or the mirror of retribution, which would reveal all unatoned sins. So this is something that also forms the basis of a lot of Chinese folk tales, stories, movies. So this also is one of the tropes that not just in Chinese culture, but I feel in all Oriental cultures, you would see the sinner being reflected in the mirror early on in the tale, so that the audience gets an insight into there is more to this person than what we can see on surface. This used to be a really fun exercise for me growing up, because once I figured this out, whenever I would watch something, if a character is spending too much time in front of the mirror, or is being reflected at like weird angles in a mirror or in a pool, I would immediately know that this person has done something. There is something that we don't see. A lot of times it's not like the bad people who you see being reflected in these random mirrors and reflections, but the good ones, the people who don't sin, the people who have like very rigid lives and rigid choices. These are the ones who kind of are revealed at the end to be that one hiding killer.
Yeah, probably like murdered the entire clan or something.
Yes.
And you did not think about it at all.
Exactly. So that I feel is a very, very common cultural trope throughout. If you also look at a lot of ancient mythology mirror tales, the idea of how a mirror reflects your soul, and hence your sins and all your deepest secrets, is also, I think, the basis of a lot of stories where paranormal entities don't have a reflection. That's also the reason why they probably can't be clicked. So the entire basis of Bram Stoker's Dracula is that Dracula cannot be reflected in a mirror. However suave he looks, and he can like groom himself all he wants, but when he stands in front of the mirror, there is no reflection. This is, I think, a Jewish folklore that talks about how, if there is a death in a family, in a household, the mirrors are to be covered for the next few days, because the spirit that has left the body in that house will travel in the house through mirrors. So if they find an uncovered mirror, they can just step out. That is why those mirrors are supposed to be covered. And it's also said that if in those days, if somebody can see themselves in a reflection in a mirror or in water for more than 3 times, they are the next ones to go.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't either. I also kind of got to know this only in our research for this podcast. But it's so fascinating, no, to think how seamlessly people link up something so ordinary, something which is like there in every household, in every room, an everyday object that all of us use, how that becomes the source of so much myth. There are so many tales in even German and Dutch myths that talk about how if your loved one kind of appears to you in a mirror, like if suddenly you're looking in a mirror and you feel like you have a likeness of a deceased loved one, it could be that they are calling out to you from afterlife. So the message passing system is like mutual. It's not just you passing these messages into the mirror, but also other people who are passing these messages to you. There are also a lot of stories around how the mirror also becomes a way for you to assess your own mortality. There are also tales where they say that the human soul takes 7 years to redeem itself, to completely attune a sin. So it is said that if you break a mirror, then there are 7 years of bad luck.
Right.
Because, like, without that mirror, how will your poor soul repair itself? There are a lot of stories like this. I think one of my favorite ones out of these would be the Japanese story of the Ungaiko. It's a haunted mirror which shows demons and monsters reflected on its surface, and the spirit haunting the mirror manipulates the reflection to make it appear as anything they like. So,
Oh.
yeah, so it could be the source of the mirror of erased because it's the devil showing you your vision as something which you truly desire, getting you to do its bidding. There are also all of these beliefs in feng shui and vastu, where they say
Right.
that mirror in a bedroom is like the source of all evil and bad that befalls you. So if you ever go to like a vastu practitioner and you tell them that I have like two mirrors in my bedroom, they will be aghast because what are you doing? All your wealth is getting drained out of those two mirrors because you're not covering them and you have them in your bedroom.
Well, thank God I don't have any mirrors in my bedroom to drain out my non existent well. But all these myths about mirrors and reflections, how do you think they have inspired cinema, literature, pop culture? Like you spoke about Harry Potter. How do you think it's influenced other forms of art?
I think if we get started just from Harry Potter itself, we would see so many occasions in the book where either a mirror or a reflection plays a very, very important role. There is the mirror of erased, of course. It's a very interesting thing to look at because the mirror not being a source of showing you who you are, how you see yourself, but it actually does the opposite. Like it shows you what you don't see in yourself, it shows you an alternate reality, it shows you what you could be. So it's like a lot of wish fulfillment, something which is unrealistic, something which is not real, and hence it is dangerous. Also, the whole idea of reflection is what plays up in the entire basilisk episode, where like you reflect in the eye of the basilisk and you die, but if the reflection gets reflected then you get petrified. So I found that science so intriguing. What happens if there are multiple surfaces to it? Like every time will you have like a different degree of harm caused to you? At what point does it stop? I used to really wonder about that. But I think also this entire idea of being petrified by looking at your reflection is because of how the basilisk turned into a monster and what it fed on. The fear of being petrified by a basilisk or dying by a basilisk was not just of death, as in like a visceral death of sorts, but it was the idea of forgetting. It was the idea of your existence ceasing to be something that would be remembered. Like you look at the basilisk and you freeze in that very moment, and that forever remains the way that you would always be.
In the case of the mourning mortal,
Yes.
that's how then what she all remains is like the ghost of.
Also, I think in a very physical way as well, like all of these, if you look at the scene in the movie where you go into the dungeon, the basilisk dungeon, there are so many people just frozen into the prime of their existence, just kind of lying there in the moment that they saw the basilisk. So I think there could be a couple of things there. It could be the fear of you turning into the monster, because mostly when you talk about monsters, that is the primary fear that you have, that they will turn you into a monster as well. Or it could also be the idea of freezing into a moment of realization that this is all your life is always going to be. I found that quite creepy as a child, that you don't even know, you're just walking nicely into whatever back from your class, and then like this stupid basilisk comes and then you just like die.
Yeah. Amongst
Yeah.
other things, the basilisk
Yeah.
is stupid.
So it's like you minding your business, you have like nothing. The basilisk also does not have like a feud with you, it's not like targeting you in any way. That I think was the strangest thing. But yeah, aside that, I think also the mirror of erased, I feel, was it's the memory that drives what you see in the mirror, the longing and the memory. So it kind of feeds on to the things that you so deeply desire, that they shape the darkest corners of your being. So that's what also Dumbledore warned him about, that, men have wasted away due to the power of the mirror, and it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. So I think the Mirror of Erased essentially stands for pining away behind the reality that cannot be, like investing too much in, thinking about what your life could be and not focusing enough on what it is, which is a very contemporary phenomena as well, because when we talk about our Instagram post, the way we represent ourselves on different social media, what we are doing is putting out the best of our lives and pining for best of other people's lives. Because the moment you start desiring that holiday, that big card, that perfect life, because all of those are our mirrors of desire, we look at them and think about how our life is inadequate, and that is what has become one of the biggest sources at the current times of people suffering through sadness and depression, because they are constantly comparing their zeros with somebody's hundreds. So I feel that all of these lores that we talk about when it comes to mirrors and reflections are essentially lores that warn us about the perils of self indulgence, vanity, and the perils of falling prey to a false image. Think of fairy tales like the magic mirror in Snow White, which is this object that has all the wisdom. It has all the knowledge and it's owned by the new queen, who uses it validate her own beauty all the time. So she'll keep asking the mirror, who's the fairest one of them all, and the mirror will keep telling her that it's her, until one day she says that no, you are not the most beautiful one now. She
Somebody
is,
else.
yes. And then she just like loses all her shit. That's directly putting forward what false validation can do to you, and how lethal it can be, and how destructive it can be to a person who is used to gaining that false validation. And I feel if you culturally dissect this one motive again, linking it back to social media, linking it back to the way we build and see ourselves now through over filtered selfies, face tuned faces, where the basic structure of your face can only be changed and made into completely different looking person. And the irony is that we still feel okay posting these photos that don't even look like us in real life, because we indulge in our vanity. No, we want to put our like best face forward. We want people to tell us that this is beautiful. That's what all likes and comments at the end of the day kind of translate into. So when you go back and follow the thread of all of these lores, I think this is where it kind of links up with our contemporary culture, and this is why also these topics are always very relevant to kind of give a thought to. The mirror in the Snow White story is the tool that consistently enables and reinforces the evil queen's vanity, which leads to her evilness and then subsequent downfall. So it also brings us to this very easy observation to draw out of, that how even now, we are talking about a fairy tale that was like written eons of years ago, and even now it remains true that it's a world where especially women are constantly reduced to their physical appearance and youthfulness, and how looking into a mirror as you age can actually be a very very painful and cruel experience for yourself. And which is why also the constant need to, the mirror not being your best friend as you grow up, and like a thousand urban phrases like that which have kind of made their way into our culture come through. Also Dracula or Carmilla that talk about vampire, it's a monster that cannot be reflected in the mirror because it does not have a soul. They cannot be represented and hence they cannot be trusted. So in Bram Stoker's Dracula, it says painters cannot paint him. Their likeness is always like someone else. See how that like links up with the myth that we just talked about, that like if you look into the mirror and if your face kind of looks like somebody well, you are next. In my last podcast also I spoke about Dorian Gray, which is like my favorite novels of all times, because of how much it unpacks in terms of your questions about identity and questions about the soul. So the picture of Dorian Gray, it's like a reflection. The image captures him as a reflection, and as his soul becomes very and cruel and evil, the reflection kind of captures that. The same motive where the true nature of his being, you can hide it all that you want on your face, but a mirror is scary because it actually shows you who you really are. Linking it to the story that I started the podcast with, remember the Ahat story? I think the import there also was that the mirror stood for a repressed version of this woman who wanted to do the things that her reflection ended up doing but wouldn't. Which is why everybody in her life is like so pleasantly surprised by how open she is suddenly. And the mirror image actually can do everything that she probably doesn't do because she's scared or socially conditioned. I think that's very, very interesting to see, because if you actually analyze the root cause of our judgment of anything, a lot of times that root cause is actually the desire to do that thing and the inability to do it because of whatever.
Right.
We judge somebody for dressing a certain way, but like a part of us, maybe like a teeny tiny part of us, does want to try out those clothes and kind of, like see how that looks. So a lot of the reflection thing taps into this little bit of insecurity, I feel. So a lot of this entire looking at a monster in your reflection, or the reflection moving and seeing, it's just the threat of that part of you taking over.
Yeah, this reminds me of the one time when I went home, and so my bedroom doesn't have a mirror. The attached bathroom had a huge mirror. And I just go home and my mom has painted over the entire mirror so that I can't see it and I can't see my reflection. And when I asked her, she was like, it's some superstition. Someone had told her that like a young woman's room should not have a mirror. So she had, I didn't really ask her because I was just so angry. I was just like,
I can imagine I would be angry too.
like, get rid of this. And then I had to get some sort of remover, and I just, even now the whole mirror is painted over and like only my face wala part has like the thing wiped, because I thought I'll wipe it, but then it's too much work, and I was like, if I can see myself, it's fine.
I think it ended up looking even eerier than you would think
So
this way.
Huge mirror covered in paint with just like one circle.
Yeah.
But this also like reminds me of the tale of Bloody Mary and the entire legend surrounding it. For our listeners who, some of them might be living under a rock and have not heard about the Bloody Mary legend. The Bloody Mary legend goes like, if you stand in front of a mirror in a dark room and chant Bloody Mary 3 times in front of the mirror, apparently a ghost appears in the mirror, and if the ghost is not too angry, might grant you your wishes. However, everywhere where I've seen the representation of Bloody Mary being enacted out in a movie or in a TV series, the ghost is always angry, like really angry. And these kids do these things and then the ghost gets them. So I don't know why people keep falling for this.
Have you guys ever tried it?
I have,
I
nothing
have.
happened.
Yeah.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
Nothing happens. But we wouldn't. We're not
Recommending this to anybody listening
Please
to this.
listen.
But like the legend around this entire myth is so interesting to actually understand. I don't know the part where this figure becomes a part who will be helpful to you. I don't know how that kind of arrived, except for, maybe somewhere along the translation, it kind of got mistranslated at some point of time and people started doing it for fun. But the actual story of the Mary and, why she was called Bloody Mary, there are so many stories around that. Like some people say that this was actually Mary I of England, who was like the daughter of Henry VIII, crazy man, and Catherine of Aragon, who had around 300 religious Protestant dissenters burnt at the stake during her reign. And she was called Bloody Mary because, of course, she had like a very violent disposition. There is also the story of this famous Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who apparently used to bathe in the blood of young virgins to maintain her youth. She was actually also called like the real vampire, and she had a lot of people that she would get killed in order to draw out her blood bath. So the term blood bath also kind of comes out of that. And then there is also a lady called Mary Worth, who was identified as like this woman who killed a lot of slaves escaping the American South during the Underground Railroad thing. And there was also somebody called Mary who was burnt at a stake because she was accused of being a witch. None of these stories kind of inspired the trust that you would have in a ghost being friendly and, you know, like doing your bidding.
They don't sound very friendly.
Yes.
Or people who would like to be friends.
So I think it's time that we have a petition to discontinue doing this particular Bloody Mary ritual. But coming from this Bloody Mary being reflected in the mirror, it does make sense why something like this would capture popular fascination so much, because you're treading into the realm of the unknown. Something appearing in the mirror again means you doing something adventurous, you doing something you're not supposed to do. I think the actual reflection of the Bloody Mary is you only, because you see yourself in a dark room standing in
with
front
a
of the
candle.
mirror looking so scared and so into character with a candle. You will get scared of your own reflection. So maybe that's the true Bloody Mary.
My earliest visual association with Bloody Mary, I remember, so there's this TV series called Supernatural, and they did this entire episode on the Bloody Mary. And I remember I was so terrified. I was really young when I saw it, and there was this the entry scene of it is this woman, very seemingly happy woman, just going back to her apartment after a long day of work, and she's gone to bed. And suddenly of course, there is a mirror in her bedroom, which then starts to like drip blood, and then Mary comes
Yes,
out
I
and
remember
kills
this.
her.
It was very traumatizing.
Yes, I was so terrified. And a lot of other renditions of also Bloody Mary being then done throughout movies and television. So mirrors then in films also have a very huge, ominous presence a lot of times.
Yeah, I think my least favorite part in any horror movie is the part where in slow motion somebody is standing in front of the mirror and just going about their usual day, and they're washing their face and they bend down, and at that moment my heart just stops because I am not prepared for what will be reflected in the mirror once they get up. And I think this kind of remains a constant source of fear and trepidation with all of us whenever we're watching any horror movie. It's become like a telltale sign. So much so that in a lot of contemporary movies, like the ones that are coming up now, they also mock this trope a lot, because you're kind of like sitting there with bated breath waiting for the monster to appear in the mirror, but then it doesn't. I also have come across so many reels that are now going around with a lot of related legends. Like there is this one where they say that you should never buy a painting from an unknown artist, because what you see in the painting, like if it's like a painting that you're buying because it has some likeness to you, it could actually be a demon that looks like you and that can actually like come out and consume you. I remember this movie called 1408, in which this guy is trapped in a hotel room where a lot of really nefarious things are happening, and then there is this window and he looks out of the window and there is a building in front of the window, and he kind of calls out for help, only to realize that the figure in the other window is just mimicking him. So it's like his own reflection, like he's caught in purgatory and this reflection is mocking him because he's doomed and there is no salvation. But I think the most captivating representation of horror in films or TV series for me would be Oculus. Oculus plays with the idea of representation in such a gut-wrenching way. My God, watching that movie, I remember it was so scary. Till date, I think it is one of the scariest things I've seen, because the horror in that movie truly stems out of what you see and what is real. And that is just so uncanny, because you can't trust your own eyes. And if you can't trust your own eyes, then what do you trust? If you can't trust your own comprehension, then what do you trust? The mirror, when they get the mirror again, this mirror thing I think is a world favorite. From Japan to Czechoslovakian tales, everywhere we see this entire story being translated through and acquiring newer dimensions. But also, like, this is the same tale of the cursed mirror that comes into this house, that first affects their parents, and then they are trying to record what this mirror does. So there is reflection at multiple levels, because the mirror reflects reality, and then this reality is being recorded by the camera, and then they constantly take out the footage and watch it on a desktop, on a laptop, on their phones. So this multiple level of reflection, each level of this reflection twists reality even further, and they can't trust any of those. I think it was very, very scary, that entire idea of multiple reflections, each being further away from reality, a completely different version of reality. Also, I think Mike Flanagan's work in general really, really exploits this reflection trope.
Right,
I think one
right.
of the famous scenes that Mike Flanagan kind of tries to pull in each of his works is the scene where, like, there is a mirror and then there is a rotating pan camera, and the pan camera kind of covers everything in the background, and then just in passing, like no shock value, nothing, just in passing, it kind of pans over the mirror, and then there's somebody just quietly standing there who you probably have missed.
Right.
It's
right.
just too unsettling to just have that glance and pass sort of a
Yeah,
acquaintance.
because you don't really even register it, kind of just like your peripheral vision or like your mind subconsciously realizes that, oh, there's something there, but you just can't understand what
It
that
also gives
feeling
you
is.
that very chilling feeling that this
Yeah.
could be happening with you also. Like, maybe in your peripheral vision as you watch this are things standing out of the mirrors looking at you, which probably you can't see. So, like, every single time you would want to stop and kind of, like, look over,
Look
make
around,
sure
exactly. Oh my God,
that
that's
you
so
are
true.
alone.
Yeah.
Also, in both Bly Manor and Haunting of Hill House, I feel mirrors and what you see in the mirrors have played really, really important roles. Just like reflection, for example, in Bly Manor, the reflection in the water, the pool, constantly going around the water, seeing somebody else in the water. I think they've really, really used that trope again as the idea of longing and stories of longing wanting to come out. Shutter, I think, would be another movie which was very creepy and centered again around this reflection thing. You can't see the ghost for real, but it gets captured in a camera. So I think, like, it made all of us who watched that movie become very, very wary and, like, go back to looking at all our old pictures and trying to
Oh, yeah,
spot
definitely.
somebody who shouldn't be there. Also, like, even if we move away from ghosts or supernatural, there is a lot of identity related representation that you see in films, especially with mirrors. Like in The Black Swan, the
Right,
transformation of the ballerina from who she is and who the character is and how she goes through the entire transformation, it's very mental, but it gets reflected every single time she sees the mirror. So in the mirror, she constantly keeps seeing her other and her transforming into the swan figure, and that's how they capture her entire journey of her complete mental breakdown. Also, generally, like, if you look at sci-fi series like The Black Mirror,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
idea of the screen as being a conduit to another world, which is something I think all of us can relate to at a very, very basic level. Like, modern day escapism is finding solace in your phone. So many hours of doom scrolling for no reason. It's like, we are just like vegetables with glass eye, kind of just not registering anything, but screen playing out hours on end. It's a form of dissociation which is being enabled by this fantasy world being reflected in your screen. So you can hide in your bedroom, quiet, no talking to nobody, taking a social break. But what is ironic is it really a social break? Watching other people dance, do stupid things, or people's homes crashing and burning is giving you this pleasure inside, which you can't go out and explore on your own. So I think it's very interesting to see how the idea of reflection not just works on a very semantic level, but it also translates into very different, diverse experiential levels. So when we look at a mirror, or when we think about a mirror, the fear is not that of the monster so much as it's the fear of who we could be. Yeah, that's, I feel, a good note to kind of end this podcast. I hope we did not scare you too much by talking about so many ghosts and so many legends and so many Bloody Marys throughout the podcast. But the idea was just to kind of do an exploration of why do these stories stay relevant across time and ages, and how do they find corollaries in so many different diverse cultures, having similar tales, similar meanings. And even today, the fear of mirror is something that we all find too much and too often in our daily lives. And I'm sorry if I got you started on your mirror fearing journey through this podcast. But yeah, this is us signing off. Poulomi, and along